Welcome to this episode focusing on understanding and supporting neurodiversity in grassroots football. This episode covers our comprehensive training course designed for coaches, players, referees, parents, carers, and volunteers. In this training, we delve into what neurodiversity means, the different ways the brain can work and interpret information, highlighting that people think differently and have varied interests and motivations, and importantly, that it is not a mental health condition. We emphasise the importance of accepting that everyone's brain works differently. We explore key neurodevelopmental conditions such as ADHD and autism, and briefly touch upon dyslexia and dyspraxia, explaining how these conditions might manifest in football settings and beyond. We highlight the prevalence of neurodiversity, with statistics suggesting that between 15 to 20% of young people live with a neurodevelopmental disorder. This means that in a typical 18-player squad, around 3 or 4 players may be neurodiverse. This episode also addresses common misconceptions surrounding neurodiverse behaviours, challenging stigma and ignorance with accurate information. We discuss how behaviours might be misinterpreted as difficult or a lack of effort, when they are often responses to stress, sensory overload, or unmet needs. We touch upon the legal aspect of neurodiversity, explaining that being neurodivergent will often amount to a disability under the Equality Act 2010, requiring reasonable adjustments to ensure equal opportunities. True equality means treating everyone differently to create equal opportunity. Furthermore, we outline the importance of identifying needs and triggers in neurodiverse players, recognizing how these can affect individuals during training or matches. We also discuss strategies for adapting training methods and communication to be more inclusive, using clear verbal instructions, visual aids, and breaking down drills into smaller steps. For coaches and clubs, we emphasise the significance of building inclusivity and creating a supportive environment on and off the pitch. This includes understanding concepts like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, and the potential for sensory processing issues. We also touch upon the differences between meltdowns and tantrums. The episode also considers the crucial role of referees and officials in understanding neurodiverse players and adapting their officiating style to provide appropriate support. This includes pre-match fact-finding and clear, simple communication. Finally, we highlight the importance of supporting families and players, building empathy, and creating a welcoming environment for everyone involved. By understanding neurodiversity and implementing inclusive strategies, grassroots football clubs can create a more supportive, successful, and safe environment for all players, both neurodiverse and neurotypical. This training equips listeners with foundational knowledge and practical insights to better support neurodiverse individuals in the grassroots football community.
Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. We are diving into neurodiversity in grassroots football today. And we've got a really cool mix of sources for this one. Training materials, club support plans, even a whole website for an educational course. It's a lot, but I think it's so important because studies suggest that something like 15 to 20% of young people are neurodivergent. So chances are you already know, coach, or play alongside someone whose brain works a little differently, even if you haven't realized it yet.
Right. And the key here is that neurodiversity isn't a deficit. It's about natural variations in how our brains are wired. It's recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to learning or thinking or experiencing the world. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing.
Okay, so help me understand this then. What exactly is neurodiversity? I mean, the term itself covers a pretty broad spectrum, right?
Yeah, it does. We're talking about conditions like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. The thing is, these often co-occur and overlap. So someone might experience traits from multiple conditions. It's not about labeling people, but rather understanding that these variations exist and they impact how individuals interact with the world, including on the football pitch.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of our sources mentioned a study where 21.5% of children and adolescents presented with at least one neurodevelopmental condition. That really highlights the need for awareness, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's not just about awareness. It's about actively debunking the myths and misconceptions that surround neurodiversity. For example, one persistent myth is that these are just phases kids will grow out of, or that it's a matter of willpower or discipline.
Right, and those sorts of assumptions can be so damaging. Instead of getting the support they need, players end up feeling misunderstood and isolated. So, to break down some of those myths, let's focus on two specific conditions, ADHD and autism. They seem to be the most commonly discussed even in these resources for football.
Yeah, they are. And for good reason. Let's start with ADHD. So in a football setting, imagine a player struggling to focus during a long explanation of a drill. Or maybe they react impulsively and commit a foul even though they know the rules. These aren't signs of bad behavior, but rather how ADHD can impact executive function and impulse control.
And then there's autism, which the source material really emphasized as a spectrum, meaning it presents differently in every individual. But some common challenges that autistic players might face include difficulty with social communication, sensory sensitivities, and a need for routine and predictability.
Exactly. A player might find it hard to understand nonverbal cues from teammates, or might get overwhelmed by the noise in crowds at a match. These can lead to misunderstandings or behaviors that get misinterpreted as being difficult or disruptive.
It's like that stress bucket analogy from one of the sources, right? Where for some neurodivergent individuals, the bucket fills up more quickly with stressors, and even small things can tip it over, leading to meltdowns or emotional outbursts. If we understand that, it changes how we react, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Instead of punishment, the focus shifts to support. And that's where grassroots football can be a powerful force for change. By creating inclusive environments, clubs can not only support their neurodivergent players, but also educate the wider community and challenge those harmful stereotypes.
Okay, so let's get practical then. Our sources outline some really specific steps coaches and referees can take to create that kind of inclusive environment. Where should we start?
Well, let's focus on coaches first. They're on the front lines, shaping the team culture and working directly with players. One of the most important things they can do is adapt their training methods. For example, instead of saying spread out, which might be too vague, try saying move 5 steps away from your teammate. Clear, concise, and actionable.
I like that. It's about making the information accessible and reducing any potential for misunderstanding or overload. And that same principle applies to communication in general, right?
Absolutely. One of the club support plans we have actually suggests pre-match briefings, where coaches can check in with neurodivergent players. It's a chance to ask, is there anything you need me to be aware of today? Or, how are you feeling about the game? Simple questions, but they can make a huge difference in building trust and understanding.
It sounds like it's all about individualization, tailoring the approach to each player's unique needs. And what about referees? How do they factor into this inclusive environment?
Referees play a crucial role too. The source material stresses the importance of pre-match fact-finding about neurodivergent players. This allows them to tailor their officiating style and provide appropriate support during the game.
So if a referee knows a player has difficulty with social communication, they might be more understanding if that player doesn't immediately make eye contact or respond verbally to a question.
Exactly. It's about understanding that what might be perceived as disrespect or defiance could actually be a manifestation of the player's neurodiversity.
This reminds me of something else I read about inclusive officiating. What exactly does that mean?
It's a fascinating concept. It's about finding that balance between upholding the rules of the game and recognizing that neurodivergent players might react or behave differently in certain situations. It requires empathy, understanding, and a willingness to adapt.
For instance, if a player with sensory sensitivities becomes overwhelmed by the noise of the crowd and needs a moment to step away from the game, an inclusive official would understand and allow that, rather than immediately issuing a penalty.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that fairness doesn't always mean treating everyone exactly the same. Sometimes it means providing different levels of support to ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to participate and enjoy the game.
That makes a lot of sense. But it's not just about the players and officials, right? Families play a huge role too.
Absolutely. Supporting families is a vital part of creating an inclusive club culture. And one of the most impactful things clubs can do is foster open communication and collaboration with families of neurodivergent players.
I was really struck by the emphasis in one of the sources on regular check-ins and collaborative goal setting. It's about creating a partnership where the club, the player, and the family are all working together towards the same goal.
Exactly. It's about understanding the unique challenges these families face and providing practical support, such as connecting them with resources and support organizations.
This one source even provided specific advice for parents and carers on how to support their children during matches. It was things like finding a quiet spot for breaks, packing sensory-friendly items, and preparing the child for potential changes in routine. It really resonated with me.
It's those little details that can make a world of difference. It shows families that the club cares, understands, and is committed to creating a truly welcoming environment.
It seems like education is a key theme here. Clubs really need to educate themselves about neurodiversity and then pass that knowledge on to their staff, volunteers, and even players.
You're absolutely right. Knowledge is power, and in this case, it's the power to create positive change. There are some really innovative training programs out there that use simulations to help neurotypical individuals experience the world through the lens of someone with ADHD or autism.
I was reading about that. Imagine trying to complete a simple task while being bombarded with distractions, constantly interrupted, or forced to switch between activities rapidly. That's just a glimpse into what it can be like for someone with ADHD. And then there are simulations for sensory overload, where participants are exposed to bright lights, loud noises, and overwhelming tactile input to give them a sense of what it's like for some autistic individuals.
Those simulations can be incredibly powerful tools for fostering empathy and understanding. It's one thing to read about these challenges, but it's another thing entirely to experience them firsthand.
And you know what? It's not just about making things easier for neurodivergent individuals. These adaptations and strategies often benefit everyone on the team. Clear communication, structured training, and a supportive environment, these are things that can enhance the experience for all players, regardless of their neurodiversity.
You're spot on. It's about creating a culture of inclusivity that values and celebrates the unique strengths and talents of every individual.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm left wondering, what if every grassroots football club truly embraced these principles of neurodiversity? What kind of impact could that have, not just on the players themselves, but on the entire community? We'll explore that more in our next segment.
It's an exciting thought, isn't it? To imagine a world where every grassroots football club embraces neurodiversity. Think of the ripple effect that could have, not just on the players, but on families, coaches, referees, the entire community.
Yeah, it's about shifting perspectives, isn't it? Instead of seeing neurodiversity as something to be managed or overcome, we start to recognize the unique strengths and talents that neurodivergent individuals bring to the table.
Precisely. For example, someone with ADHD might have that boundless energy and that knack for thinking outside the box, which could be invaluable assets on the pitch. Imagine them disrupting the opponent's plays with their unpredictable movements or coming up with creative strategies that no one else has thought of.
And a player with autism might have exceptional attention to detail and a strong sense of fairness, making them a natural fit for refereeing. They might be able to spot fouls that others miss or make impartial judgments based on a strict interpretation of the rules.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that what might be perceived as a challenge in one context can actually be a strength in another. And it's not just about the players themselves. Imagine the impact on coaches who would be equipped with the knowledge and skills to support all types of learners and create a truly inclusive training environment.
That's where those training programs we talked about earlier come in, right? The ones specifically designed to educate coaches about neurodiversity. The website for one course really stood out to me.
Those programs are crucial. They can provide coaches with practical strategies for adapting their communication styles, breaking down drills into manageable steps, and creating routines that provide structure and predictability, which can be incredibly beneficial for neurodivergent players.
One thing that resonated with me from the source material was the emphasis on the need for practical and accessible training. Most grassroots coaches are volunteers with busy lives, so the training needs to fit into their schedules and give them actionable strategies they can use right away.
Absolutely. It can't be some long, drawn-out academic course. It needs to be concise, hands-on, and directly applicable to the real-world challenges coaches face on the pitch.
And it's not just about the how-to of coaching. It's about fostering a deeper understanding of neurodiversity itself. It's about challenging those ingrained misconceptions and cultivating a culture of empathy and acceptance within the club.
Couldn't agree more. It's about creating a safe space where players feel comfortable disclosing their neurodiversity, knowing they'll be met with support and understanding, not judgment or stigma.
Imagine a player feeling confident enough to say, "Hey coach, I learn best when you show me visually, not just tell me." That kind of open communication can be transformative.
Absolutely. That's when real change can happen. When players feel empowered to be themselves, to express their needs, and to celebrate their unique strengths.
And think of the possibilities if we harness those strengths. Imagine a team where neurodiversity is seen as an asset, where players with different ways of thinking and learning are encouraged to collaborate and contribute their unique perspectives.
It's about embracing the full spectrum of human potential, both on and off the pitch. It's about taking what we learn in the context of football and applying it to schools, workplaces, communities, everywhere where people interact.
That's a powerful idea. What if we approached every interaction with the awareness that not everyone's brain works the same way? What if we focused on understanding and accommodating those differences rather than trying to force everyone into the same mold?
It would require a significant shift in mindset, but the potential benefits are enormous. It's about creating a more inclusive and equitable society. And grassroots football can be a catalyst for that change.
Speaking of creating change, one thing that really stood out to me in the source material was the emphasis on monitoring and evaluating inclusivity efforts. It's not enough to just implement these strategies. We need to assess their impact and make adjustments along the way.
You're absolutely right. It's an ongoing process. We need to be responsive to the needs of the players, families, and coaches. We need to create a feedback loop where everyone feels heard and their input is valued.
So how can clubs actually do that? What are some practical ways to monitor and evaluate their inclusivity efforts?
Well, the club support plan we have actually offers some concrete suggestions. Things like regular check-ins with players, families, and coaches.
Creating open communication channels where people can share feedback easily?
And even conducting surveys to gauge the overall impact of the initiative. It's about gathering data, both quantitative and qualitative, to see what's working, what's not, and where there's room for improvement.
And then using that information to make informed decisions, to tweak strategies, to ensure they're truly meeting the needs of everyone involved. It's about continuous improvement, not a one-time fix.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination. There's no magic formula for instant perfection. It's about constantly learning, adapting, and evolving.
So bringing this back to our listener, what does all this mean for them? How can they take these principles of neurodiversity and apply them in their own football experience or even in other areas of their life?
That's a great question. It starts with awareness. Take the time to learn about neurodiversity. Challenge your own assumptions. Open yourself up to different ways of thinking and being.
It's about expanding our understanding of what normal even means. We tend to have these narrow definitions. But the reality is there's a whole spectrum of human experience, and that's something to be celebrated, not feared.
It is. And once you have that awareness, then it's about action. How can you create more inclusive spaces in your own sphere of influence?
How can you be an ally to those who might experience the world differently than you do?
How can you advocate for understanding and acceptance? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves, and I believe the answers have the potential to unlock incredible possibilities, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
You know, as we've been talking about all this, I keep thinking about this like untapped potential that's out there just waiting to be unleashed.
It is remarkable to think about, isn't it? And the exciting thing is we're already seeing this shift happening.
What do you mean?
Well, more and more we're seeing neurodivergent individuals achieving incredible things in all areas of life. Business, the arts, sciences, even athletics. They're breaking down barriers and challenging those old ideas of what's possible.
Yeah, and it's not just about individual achievements either. It's the collective power of different minds coming together, collaborating, and creating something truly remarkable.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of tools for collaboration, there's another aspect of this we haven't touched on yet, technology. It can be such a powerful force for leveling the playing field and empowering neurodivergent individuals.
That's a good point. We've talked a lot about adapting training methods and communication styles, but technology can play a huge role too, can't it?
Absolutely. Think about assistive technology for communication, noise-canceling headphones for sensory overload, visual aids for learning, even apps that help with organization and time management. These tools can make a world of difference.
It's not just specialized tools either. Even everyday technology like smartphones and tablets can be incredibly helpful. I'm thinking of a player with ADHD who uses a reminder app to stay organized, or a player with autism who relies on a visual schedule app to navigate their day.
And let's not forget about the power of online communities. Social media platforms can be a lifeline for neurodivergent individuals and their families, providing a space to share experiences, offer support, and build a sense of belonging.
It's like creating a virtual safe space where people feel seen, heard, and understood.
Exactly. It's about fostering connection and understanding. And that's where we as individuals and as a society have a responsibility to create those welcoming spaces, both online and offline.
So what does that look like in practice?
It can take many forms. It might be educating yourself about neurodiversity and challenging your own biases.
It could be reaching out to a friend or family member who's neurodivergent and offering your support.
Or maybe it's advocating for inclusivity and accessibility in your workplace or community.
It sounds like any action we take, no matter how small, can contribute to a more inclusive world.
Absolutely. It's about shifting our mindset from tolerance to acceptance, from seeing differences as deficits to recognizing them as strengths.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into neurodiversity, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this conversation?
This is just the beginning. The more we learn about neurodiversity, the more we realize there's so much more to discover. It's an ongoing journey of understanding, acceptance, and appreciation for the incredible diversity of the human mind.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and maybe even inspired you to learn more and take action. Remember, the power to create a more inclusive world for everyone starts with each of us.